Through Inazuma's final Archon quest, we finally got to learn information about the Fatui's 6th Harbinger, Scaramouche the Balladeer. But despite this, most of the fine details surrounding his creation and motivations are still shrouded in mystery. Recently, I saw an interesting discussion post by Reddit user AwesomePurplePants, which notes some of the striking parallels between the story of Scaramouche and the classic tale of Frankenstein, which ultimately suggested that Scaramouche was an unsuccessful attempt to resurrect A's lost sister, Raiden Makoto. While I personally feel that the comparisons to Frankenstein don't really hold up enough to make conclusions off of, I find the idea of Scaramouche being a failed reincarnation very intriguing. It would fit in with what we already know about the Raiden sisters, Scaramouche, and the other gods of Teyvat, as well as clue us in to how Scaramouche's story may develop down the line. But before we begin, I am happy to announce that this video is sponsored by Elyon. This free-to-play MMORPG that just released on Steam is brought to you by the developers of PUBG and Terra Online. In this fantasy world, two sovereign realms, the Vulpin and Antari, are at war over Elyon, a coveted portal which is said to lead to paradise. Join the war as one of 6 unique classes and create an adventure with an experience unique to your tastes. Character customization is extensive in both cosmetic appearance and gameplay, with a wide array of options to choose from in terms of skills and stats. You can work together with other players to form clans, do business, and team up for dungeons as you get stronger, or you can test your skills against others in open world PvP combat. If this interests you, you can check out the game using the link in the description below. Thanks again to Elyon for supporting the channel. Alright, so the theory goes that following the death of her sister and all her closest friends, A decides to try and restore the life of her sister by placing her divine remnants in her first puppet. But along the way, something ends up going wrong, causing her to create a new life form, which she named Kunikuzushi. Realizing the immorality of her actions, she is too ashamed to even look at her creation, and so she seals away his divine powers before abandoning him to roam free in Inazuma. Right off the bat, I'm sure that sounds pretty crazy, but it would be consistent with what we know about the death of gods not being very clear cut. We have heard of weaker godly beings completely dying before, such as Havria, the god of salt from Zhongli's first story quest, but even she had traces of her existence left behind. And with stronger divine beings, it's made even more clear that they don't just disappear. Osial was defeated by Morax and sealed in an underwater prison, but was able to be unleashed at full power through the Fatui made sigils of permission. Xiao's duty is to fight off demons that spawn from the remains of other gods who were defeated in the Archon War. And recently in Inazuma, we've experienced the Tatarigami, a curse manifested on Yashiori Island from the lingering power of the slain serpent god, Orobashi. So because of this, it's not hard to believe that Makoto, who was strong enough to emerge victorious in the Archon War, would leave behind some kind of divine remains upon her death during the Cataclysm. So assuming this essence was incorporated into making Scaramouche, it would actually reasonably account for the differences between him and the Raiden Shogun puppet. We know that he was created first, simply as a proof of concept, but for a prototype, it's kind of strange that he would have more complex capabilities than his successor. The Raiden Shogun is extremely straightforward, follows a set of directives, and will passively let things happen as long as they don't interfere with those instructions. On the other hand though, Scaramouche is capable of feigning a different personality, as we can see in the Unreconciled Stars cutscenes where he acts friendly to try and approach the traveler before later showing his true intentions. In the descriptions of the artifacts of the Pale Flame set, which are all about different Fatui Harbingers, the Surpassing Cup clearly talks about Scaramouche. The quotes in it are coming from his perspective, and we can see that he is capable of weighing different options before making a decision. In this case, he finds the Fatui fun to be around, so he'd rather join them than continue to drift aimlessly. And we know that it isn't due to the influence of the Fatui that he is more perceptive and conscious than the Raiden Shogun, so it would make sense if that catalyst was the spirit of a real person. This would also fill in a lot of the other holes surrounding Scaramouche's origin. It's pretty reasonable that A wouldn't want to destroy the life she just created, but you would think that she would at least take some kind of responsibility over him. That wouldn't necessarily even mean taking care of him herself, as she could have reasonably placed him under the care of one of Inazuma's noble families. But instead, she was presumably far too ashamed of his existence and or emotionally detached, leading to the cruel treatment of him being left to roam on his own. Furthermore, Makoto's presence could explain how he was able to learn about his godly status before his powers were unlocked by the Fatui. Scaramouche also notably comments fondly on short-lasting moments of beauty when Makoto seemed to incidentally be the god of transience. I also found it interesting that Scaramouche wears Japanese-inspired Inazuma clothing when you would think that he would want to have no association with the place that turned him bitter. Specifically, his iconic hat seems to be inspired by the Japanese ichimegasa, which was typically worn by noble women. Another standout visual detail is his colors. He has purple hair and purple eyes, similar to the Raiden sisters, but it's the colored highlights on the back that are really intriguing. If it is true that his appearance wasn't based on A, then for what reason would they share this detail? For the last thing I just mentioned, as well as some other points, I suppose it is possible to just be an incidental byproduct of being a puppet made by A, but altogether I feel that it does make sense for Scaramouche to have the spirit of Makoto lay dormant inside him. Surprisingly, none of this theory contradicts anything that was previously confirmed, as far as I can tell. Our main source of information was of course Yaemiko, and there's no reason to believe that she isn't reliable, but even she doesn't know all of the details surrounding Scaramouche's past. She clearly states that she isn't aware of whatever technology or magic was used to create the puppets, and that she doesn't know the exact reason for Scaramouche's treatment after his creation. And the line saying that his appearance and intellect weren't based on A would technically be true if he were instead based on her twin sister. A's voice line on Kunikuzushi stays consistent with what we already know, but it is still very vague. And although we are on pretty good terms with all the Archons, they're known to keep secrets from us, especially when it comes to past events with tragic outcomes. So it's not really hard to believe that A would be actively trying to keep this secret. Alright, so let's say that this theory does end up holding true. What does it actually mean in terms of implications? Well, first it means that he is way stronger than pretty much any character we've met so far. If his power was originally meant to reflect Makoto's, and then he had his potential further unlocked by the Fatui, well, I think it's safe to assume he is pretty dangerous. But also, despite his capabilities, he is only number 6 of the Harbingers, which would lead you to think that those above him must be just as threatening, if not more. This theory would also give context to his real name, Kunikuzushi, which can be interpreted as country destroyer or collapse of a country. The names of the Raiden sisters are pretty on the nose, with Makoto meaning truth and A meaning shadow, so I'm not quite subscribed to the idea that Kunikuzushi was made with the original intention of being a weapon. Instead, I think that narratively, it reflects how Kunikuzushi's creation marked the downfall of Inazuma's government, which ultimately began with Makoto's death. Because of it, A became fearful of death and erosion, thus seeking eternity. So in order to protect herself physically and mentally, she created a puppet which she could stow herself away in, but also sacrificed being able to relate to the people she rules over. So what I think A feels she owes Scaramouche is a happy life, for having too high expectations when creating him and then casting him aside because of something out of his control. But now he has since found his own joy in the ranks of the Fatui, so A doesn't wish to assert control over him because they are providing that which she failed to give. In the Clean House World quest added in 2.2, NPC Shizuru mentions that the Fatui are still doing stuff in Yashori Island despite one Harbinger dying and the other one having gone missing. And it doesn't seem to mean he just went back to the Fatui headquarters in Snezhnaya, but more like he ran off after acquiring the Gnosis. So based on everything I've talked about today, I think that an interesting and likely direction for Scaramouche's story to go in would be connecting with the kind spirit of Makoto after somehow becoming whole through obtaining her Gnosis, maybe learning about how to truly appreciate the fragility of life despite being an immortal creation. I know that there are people out there who want Scaramouche to be the rare example of an irredeemably evil character, but for one, his backstory is already quite tragic and open for sympathy, and 2, it is a trend that antagonistic characters who are made playable are humanized for the sake of marketability. So if they are going to do it anyway, I would at least hope they make it interesting. But anyways, no matter if this theory ends up being right or way off the mark, I think Scaramouche's story will definitely continue to be one of Genshin's most intriguing. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, thanks for watching.